First up, government has resumed first negotiations with Eurobond holders over new terms for restructuring the over $13 billion debt. This is what Joy Business has picked up from some of the commercial creditors present at these meetings. Here's George Rafa with more from Washington, D.C. in the U.S.
Joy Business understands that there has been 3 separate meetings on the sidelines of the IMF World Bank spring meetings in Washington, D.C., USA. One to these commercial creditors, the Eurobond holders, and the IMF. This is to ensure that whatever deal that they reach with these creditors and Eurobond holders are in line with the IMF program and will not result in an increase in Ghana's debt stock going forward, but rather reduce it in the long term. Sources say government is trying to use these engagements to review some of the terms presented to these Eurobond holders. Government is being forced to go through this route again after the IMF rejected an initial deal reached with the Eurobond holders and the commercial creditors. However, government insists it remains optimistic that a deal could be reached that is an agreement in principle before the end of this week or at the end of the IMF World Bank spring meetings in Washington, D.C. Ghana is trying to restructure about $13.4 billion worth of debts coming from these Eurobond investors.
All right, joining me on Zoom is Dr. Seram Kawo, Senior Finance Lecturer at the University of Cape Coast. Thank you so much for joining us. So what would it take to secure a deal with the international bondholders as negotiations resume?
Thank you very much, Darry. It's going to take us accountability, transparency, and being fair with the international community in terms of trying to be transparent with them and making sure that they also benefit from this particular deal. Let us remember that the external bondholders, when they were signing their agreement, may have agreed to some of the terms of that particular bond. And the terms might include a debt structuring that would actually affect their various countries. And so trying to vary the terms that will result into haircut based a situation where the interest rate will be reduced or the period of payment will be extended, some of these things might actually affect. So government will also need to compromise its position on the terms that have been proposed to the external bondholders in order to come to an amicable solution.
Well, what are the implications of a delay in reaching a deal on the IMF program? We are told that it's not a prerequisite for the release of the second tranche of funds from the IMF, but what will be the implication if this delays further?
Yeah, so we are already out of the international financial market. And once the debt has not been restructured, payments are not done, what it is going to mean is that the country is going to accumulate more interest. And this interest will come at a compound rate. And so we might be facing credibility issues going forward. Already the domestic debt exchange is affecting the domestic market. When government raises bonds now, I'm sure only a few institutions and individuals will want to take the risk of getting into government bonds. And in the international market, that is also going to play a critical role. Because once you are not able to pay the debt, you are not creditworthy, and countries will not be able to lend money to you.
Meantime, the IMF projecting Ghana's debt to GDP ratio would increase further to reach almost 84% by the end of this year. This projection did not factor the current negotiations to restructure Ghana's debts, but it's still worrying, isn't it?
It is still very worrying because...
Okay, Dr. Seram Kawo frozen there. We'll try and get back to him, but we still did deal with debt issues because Finance Minister Dr. Mohamed Amin Adam has reaffirmed the government's commitment to resolving the nation's energy sector debt crisis. He has been speaking at the IMF World Bank spring meetings. Take a listen.
There's a task force chaired by the Vice President, which is overseeing the implementation of the various reforms and the measures that we are implementing to strengthen the finances of the sector include IPP renegotiation. We are renegotiating some of the contracts we've signed with the independent power producers so that we can reduce the cost of generation. We also are implementing tariff reforms. Since 2022, the regulator, Public Utilities Regulatory Commission, put in place a multi-year tariff framework that led to increase in tariffs by about 70% since September 2022. But this is to assure investors that we admit there are challenges, but we are also bold as a government to take the necessary bullets in order for us to put the sector in a more sustainable manner so as to address those challenges that investors are usually worried about. Then we have the cash waterfall mechanism. Right. It's important because at least it ensures that there's cash flow. I mean, every player in the value chain has some cash flow so that they can be able to meet their operational cost. But it is important to also state that we have had challenges implementing the cash waterfall mechanism, as a result of which, through our collaboration with the World Bank, with the IMF, we have instituted some measures to make it more effective. One of the measures we have introduced is to audit the cash waterfall mechanism quarterly. Yeah. But we're also required to publish the audit findings. And then in addition to this, we are discussing with the World Bank under what we call P4R program, which will require us to acquire or procure up to 1 million meters, because the issue of addressing the finances in the sector is not just about tariff adjustment, but also how we can improve on collection. You have up to 7 different meters in the system which are not speaking to each other. And therefore, we want to be able to harmonize our metering system, to standardize the metering system.
All right, heading back to Dr. Seram Kawo, as we discussed Ghana's debt issues, and so we're talking about the IMF's projection that Ghana's debt to GDP ratio could reach 84% by the end of this year. Certainly a worrying projection there from the IMF, Doc.
I was saying a worrying projection in the sense that we are already with the IMF, and we are finding other ways of making sure that we get money from other sources. And so there has been loan agreements that we are giving. And so if we don't really discipline ourselves, ensure that we follow the IMF and not necessarily borrowing, then that will be a situation that we cannot control. And so the projection that the debt to GDP will raise by 84% is a serious issue, and we need to look at how we'll be able to solve it.
How well would you say the government is doing with this debt management strategy? What would you recommend?
The debt management strategy is bad. The situation where we borrow money to pay the monies that have been borrowed, in our local parlance, we will say that you are robbing Peter to pay Paul. And that is what government is doing. The debt management issue is also very bad because government payment to contractors and for goods and services delay. The delayance in paying these contracts, goods and services costs a lot of money to the government, because the contract prices will be inflated simply because there will be delays in payment, and the value of money comes in, and we need to look at it critically. So government should, as a matter of agency, should try as much as possible to find how they can finance the activities of contractors for goods and services that are going to be done. Using the accrual system of accounting for this is very bad, and that is what is affecting government. And so there's a need for us to look at it.
All right, Dr. Seram Kawo, Senior Finance Lecturer, University of Cape Coast Business School, thank you so much for speaking to us.